Good morning. Woo, we have a lot to cover, and tomorrow is Thanksgiving. And I want to let you know that I'm going to be right here because I want to spend tomorrow's show talking about what we can be grateful about and hearing about what folks are making or if they're dodging having to prepare a meal, what they're doing for Thanksgiving, where they're going, and not their favorite dish or their favorite pie, because I'm much more interested in Thanksgiving nightmares from your childhood. For example, I might be able to share with you tomorrow the time my mother gave the entire family food poisoning, and there was a lot of projectile vomiting and emergency procedures. And it was all the oven's fault, not hers. At any rate, let's move on from that memory. What we need to talk about today is how Pete Buttigieg absolutely schooled Elon Musk. And let me tell you a little bit more about that before I show it to you, and why it can kind of give us hope about the future of our, how do I put it, the future of our oligarchic form of government that we have right now. Because I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Let me talk to you about this. The fact is, money bought this election, as did propaganda. And some people feel like that either means utter doom, like we have to give up, there's nothing we can do. And then others think that, we should just go, to the barricades, and that somehow protests this time around will make all the difference. I think neither thing is true. I think obviously voting in the midterms is going to make a big difference, because right now the House is expected to have a reed thin majority. The Democrats even picked up some seats in the House. And come January, with all the nominees that Donald Trump has made to his cabinet that will be joining his administration, it's going to be a slim margin of like 217 to 215 is what they're thinking now. And that's just temporary. It's very hard to get stuff done, and come the midterms, it will be even harder. Plus, of course, winning back the Senate would help. Got some other good news, guys. Sherrod Brown should, and I hope does, run for the empty seat that J.D. Vance is going to have in place, right? So we can incrementally make things better. But the federal level ain't where it's happening. It's all local and the states. There's a conversation that I had in the fall of 2021 with an utterly brilliant data scientist who kind of ran through this with me. I don't want to do any kind of name dropping. I'll have a different show on this. Utterly brilliant professor who is a data scientist, who even at that point thought the only way to save democracy is at the state and local level. And the good news is, at least when it comes to the states, referenda, like on abortion, tend to pass. Of course, the only state where that's not the case is Florida, because they imposed their supermajority requirement to allow for abortion rights. But at any rate, I am hopeful. I'm super hopeful at the state level, which brings me to our friend Pete Buttigieg, because we've got a duality here. We still have democracy at the local and state level. We need to work very hard to make sure that people who are in office in our communities and in our states know what they're doing to provide the services we need, fund our schools, our roads, make sure the First Amendment applies, that healthcare rights are not stomped on, right? That's at the state level. And to some degree at the state level, hopefully the states and communities will be able to resist the invasion by federal forces to pull out undocumented people out of their homes, kids out of their schools, and bust them away and put them in camps. I'm hopeful for that. I'm less hopeful that can happen, because what I understand is that that in Denver, my understanding is the mayor there and the police are not going to actually stand up. I don't think. I've heard some of a backtracking on that. But the bottom line is, I'm psyched about the states, and I'm particularly psyched about Pete Buttigieg. My being a Michigander, you may know he lives in Grand Rapids with his husband Chastain and their 2 children. And Pete has announced that he's going to resign as Secretary of Transportation because let Donald Trump appoint whoever whatever clown or goon or benefactor he wants to into that role. That's how that's going to play if he can push that through the Senate. But what I've heard rumors of, or maybe I'm making the rumor, is I would love for Pete Buttigieg to run for governor of Michigan. Michigan has term limits, my friends. And the fabulous big Gretchen Whitmer is no longer, she's on her last term of office. I, as a Michigander, would feel very well represented by Pete Buttigieg. Plus, we need very, very strong governors. Governors are also executives. We are the United States of America. Governors together have so much power. Plus, not only they, again, help fund our lives locally and help make sure our priorities are right and our rights are protected, but they have the power together to stand up to a tyrannical central administration, to stand up to essentially Donald Trump's kingdom or fiefdom or whatever you want to call it, or mob family. Now, back to Pete Buttigieg. Something I'm really happy about is he seems to have all the skills necessary to, in this new oligarchy, in this new. Actually, someone said, I'm sure that's why he moved there. Well, I think that's where Chasten is from. Like, that's where his family is from, is my understanding. But at any rate, okay. So here's the great Pete Buttigieg thing relating to Elon Musk. And I'm going to pull this back up on stage. What I'm showing you here is the thumbnail for today, obviously. And when I say that Pete schooled Elon, I'm pointing to a tweet exchange. And you see the one I have here on the screen where I put up here, the tweet you quoted is false. Now, Pete, made that comment to Donald Trump Jr., but Elon Musk jumped in. Okay, so we end up having essentially a back and forth between Elon Musk and Pete Buttigieg. So I'm going to pull that exchange up on the screen for you so you can see. This is how this began. Okay, guys, this is, I think, fantastic. It demonstrates a certain kind of diplomacy that you would see inside of corporate negotiations. It's the kind of thing that you are going to have to with Elon Musk, because to some degree, Elon Musk is someone who can be influenced and who has the ear of Donald Trump. Is this perfect? No. Is it the same thing as visiting Donald Trump and kissing his ring at Mar-a-Lago? No. Because Pete Buttigieg is on Twitter, does that mean I'm going back there? No. I am not a politician. You probably aren't either. I'm also not going to be running for governor of Michigan. But when you have someone, and again, I certainly hope Pete does, but right now, Pete Buttigieg is the Secretary of Transportation. And he, in this exchange, and also what he has done on Fox News, I believe, has demonstrated the ability not to take the bait, to provide straightforward information, and hopefully to influence the people who matter. So again, here's how this exchange began. Donald Trump Jr., high off of his last exchange with Elon Musk, remember we talked about that, where he was encouraging Elon essentially to buy MSNBC. Here we go. So we've got this guy, I don't know who it is, Michael Truly, and he tweeted out, Pete Buttigieg will leave his post as transportation secretary, having spent $7.5 billion to build 8 electronic vehicle charging stations. Right? That is the tweet. It sounds pathetic. I mean, seriously, to be accused of spending nearly $8 billion or spending $7.5 billion to build 8 electronic vehicle charging stations is tantamount to saying that he spent $1 billion per electronic vehicle charging station. And that is so inflammatory and so incorrect. And yet, because so many people have come to believe the false statement that Ronald Reagan made years ago, that government is the problem, remember? It's not true. And this feeds into that. And so Donald Trump Jr., without fact checking, says, does not seem like a great return on investment, but hey, he checked a woke box, so it's totally worth it. Okay, so what's going on here? I'm going to deal with the response in a second. What's going on here is there is an affirmation of a lie. It's calling the Biden administration, and in particular, Pete Buttigieg, incompetent. And then a little twist at the end. He checked a woke box, so it's totally worth it. Suggesting that Pete Buttigieg, because he is a gay man, that's the reason why he got the job. I would hold up Pete Buttigieg's resume up against Donald Trump's resume, son or father, every day of the week. I mean, geez, Pete Buttigieg, I'm serious. And I am not even going to go through everything he's done in his life, right? I'm not going to go through his background as a Rhodes Scholar. I mean, I'm going to throw some things out, being the mayor of a town. I'm not going to, do I need to throw in a consultant at McKinsey, that he is now Secretary of Transportation and does an amazing job, and we're going to hear about this. Whereas Donald Trump Jr. has only worked for daddy his whole life, as far as I am aware. That is not an accomplished resume. Now let's continue on to the next slide. This is where we get Elon Musk responding. Okay, I'm sorry. This is where, so Pete, let me just go back and explain how this happened. Right below, when Donald Trump says, this insult, that was told, oh, it's totally worth it. Directly below that, Pete Buttigieg said, excuse me, guys, the tweet you quoted is false. I mean, how perfect. Does not take the bait. Does not, I love it. He doesn't respond. He doesn't say, yeah, it was a good return on investment, or you don't know what you're talking about, or fuck you, if I'm gay, what difference does it make? He doesn't. What Pete does, and it's just so perfect, is on the facts. The tweet you quoted is false. What does Elon respond? Elon then says, well, please post the rebuttal. Then community notes will take care of the rest. Now, I'm not on Twitter anymore, but you remember, if you've been on it, Elon's idea is that he would let people say whatever he wants, all kinds of rabid, incorrect, false information. And he believed that community notes, that we would use the democratic process. And somehow if enough people with credit, if someone responded that something wasn't true, that the algorithm would then somehow ask people, vote this up. Do you think these responses are helpful? And so on. Okay, that's how it works. I'm not condoning it, but I am explaining the context. What happens next is the stroke of genius. Okay, so Pete says, he doesn't say thank you for that invitation. He is not obsequious. He just does the facts, man. Here he goes. To start, $7.5 billion has not been spent, nor anything like that. That's the entire program budget for the NEVI program. I'm guessing N stands for new, and maybe NEVI is the New Electronic Vehicle Initiative. I don't know, but let's go with that. That sounds about right. So that's the entire program budget for the NEVI program, which is to help build out a national charging network by 2030. Right, guys? 6 years from now. Secondly, there are chargers now operational in 9 states, which does not mean 9 chargers, to be clear. These are only the first handful, though. Most are to be built in the second half of the decade. Okay, second half of the decade would be between 2025 and 2030, right? Then Pete adds, third, in this program, the chargers are built by the states, not the federal government. And while it takes time to get a novel multi-billion-dollar program going across 50 states, the states are on track. Cool. Okay, now let's talk about the next slide. Now this one, I'm going to explain what is on the clickable screen. It doesn't come across, and I'll be sharing it in a moment. The next slide, it says, in his last comment on this chain, Secretary Pete Buttigieg says, for anyone interested in this program and where the chargers are going, here's further data and a map. What did Elon Musk say in response? This is helpful to understand. Okay, now let's talk about the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to show you this. I think this is super exciting. I'm blowing it up. You can click on the actual link. I don't have it right now because I don't want to give you a Twitter link right now, but I'm going to find the link to this page. I clicked on the link, and when I have a moment, I'm going to throw it into the chat for you. This is a screenshot from that page. If you click through, Pete Buttigieg invited us to find out. This is how you find a NEVI station. And here's what it says. Explore announced and energized NEVI stations on our custom map. The map tracks NEVI sites through the $5 billion formula program. It does not include sites supported by competitive funding. And he says, note, we are in the process of adding chargers in Iowa, Oregon, and California. Okay, guys. Let me just remove that slide for a second. That's amazing on so many levels. Amazing for a couple reasons. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about the federal initiative to build charger stations. I knew nothing. And this is huge for Michael and I. We have been talking, hey, Michael, hi, honey. We've been talking about replacing our, 20-year-old minivan, and we bought it used because I did not want to give fully into being a minivan mom. But we've been talking about replacing the shell of, no, it still drives barely, of our minivan and getting an EV. And one of the issues about getting an electronic vehicle is the charging issues. Now, we wouldn't be driving it very far, but to be clear, and maybe I should be a little more clear about this, although I'm in Michigan, Michael's still in Massachusetts, and it's complicated, and I'm here right now because it's Thanksgiving weekend, but I'm mostly in Michigan during the semesters. Okay, so he doesn't have to drive very far in this EV, but still, there's this whole issue. Yeah, you can put a charging station or plug your car in at home if it's 100% EV and not a hybrid. But what if you're on the road? What if you do want to take your EV, I don't know, to New York, or you want to drive beyond the range, right? It's helpful to know there's a charging station. And the biggest obstacle when you are researching EVs, besides figuring out which one to buy, reading Car and Driver and blah, 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 the biggest obstacle is the not knowing, one, where you'll find a charging station, and two, what the hell it costs to charge the car. Trying to figure out, all of us know that the price of gas can go up and down, but we have a rough idea when we hear about how many gallons are in the tank of a gas-fueled car or even a hybrid. We have an idea. If the car says it gets X miles per gallon, we actually get a sense of how often we would have to fill up the car. When it comes to buying an EV, it is almost a black box. I swear to you. I know people with EVs, and you ask them this question, and it's just not, you don't get a lot of answer. Plus, if you put your charging station at home, how much electricity are you going to be using at your house? What will that cost? I know that we don't, for many of us, you want to get this car because you don't want to further the problem of, CO2 as a greenhouse gas and hurt the planet. But at the same time, where I used to live, when Michael's in Massachusetts, our electricity used to come from a coal-fired plant. Okay, I don't want to get fully into the scientific weeds. All I want to say is I'm hugely grateful that actually Pete Buttigieg got into that debate, was very factual, because he basically shed light on what we all need to know, did so in such a way not to take the bait, not to even speak to Donald Trump Jr. directly. He just said, basically, as we mentioned, that started out with this comment: the tweet you quoted is false. The tweet you quoted is false. Now, we know Pete has schooled Elon before. This isn't the first time they've had one of those exchanges. One time they had such an exchange when Elon Musk was complaining on Twitter that it was very hard to get flights into some of the hurricane flooded and damaged areas in North Carolina. And Pete was trying to explain what was going on. And after that conversation, apparently, there was a better understanding. This is the kind of person we need always in government, but especially in times like this, when clear communication with the people who appear to have the ear of the man who has the levers of power is essential. Is it perfect? No. Is it collaborating with the enemy? No. It's making sure that we actually have things that work and function and help us in this society, and that we're not just on a standstill as Donald Trump once again wreaks havoc in this country. So that gives me tremendous hope. Now, I got something else for you, because this is fun, and it isn't even crazy town. Have you seen this? Have you seen this, you guys? Oh, I want to make this bigger. I'm sorry. This is a court sketch of Rudy Giuliani in court yesterday, yelling at the judge, after which he got rebuked. And this is a court sketch, and I want to read for you what this says right here. The guy who tweeted it out, Dan Sullivan, said, "I was already excited to click on a news story about Rudy Giuliani having a meltdown in court today and yelling at the judge, but nothing prepared me for this courtroom sketch." You guys, this has become, this sketch is now the new meme. It really is. And it is so good. So let me tell you, I actually have a clip of Rudy after his court appearance, but I feel that it is helpful to share with you why he was in court yesterday and what went down. Okay, so Rudy Giuliani was in Manhattan yesterday in federal court, and this relates to the defamation claim brought to him by Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, the mother and daughter, who he allegedly defamed in connection with the vote counting back in 2020. And what happened is he's in a situation, he's in court, and the judge wants to understand why Rudy has been dragging his feet concerning handing over his assets. So he's been ordered to turn over his belongings to Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman, as mentioned. And this is because these women won a defamation lawsuit against him to the tune of $148 million in damages. That was the verdict. And he was so angry, he said, this is Rudy, every implication you make is against me. And then he starts yelling, "I don't have a car. I don't have a credit card." And he said, they have put a stop order on, for example, my Social Security account. Okay. So much pity for him. And then the judge cut him off and said, "I permitted Mr. Giuliani to speak. Next time, I will not permit him to speak, and the court will have to take action." So the judge admonished him and banged on the table lightly with a pen. And previously, you should know, Judge Lyman had threatened to hold him in contempt because he'd missed a deadline before to hand over some of his assets to the women, just a starting point of assets. And so Giuliani basically erupted in court because he does not want to hand his assets over. Okay, so this was, the judge said, "You're a competent person. and that he reminded him that he previously asked Rudy Giuliani why he hadn't handed over title to his vintage Mercedes-Benz convertible. He'd been ordered to surrender that Benz, this sounds nice, to Freeman and Moss. Eventually, though, of course, earlier this month, earlier in November, he did not only hand over the Benz, but his watch collection, a ring. And right now, Rudy is in the process of turning over his New York apartment to mother and daughter. Now, what happened yesterday is that the fight was there was supposed to be a hearing on January 16th, early next year, right? And Rudy wants to postpone that hearing, right? He wants to postpone the hearing because, and by the way, the hearing relates to some of the assets he doesn't want to hand over. One of the things he does not want to hand over to the women he defamed is a condo that he owns in Palm Beach, okay, Palm Beach, Florida. He's claiming it is his homestead, which then would be protected against these women who are his creditors. So there needs to be a hearing, a factual hearing about that. Now, here's the kicker, and then I'm going to get to Rudy. The kicker here is what Rudy said, his lawyer said to the judge at this point, listen, my client is still, in touch with, in communication with Donald Trump, and he has plans to attend the inauguration, which, as you probably know, is January 20th. I'm saying that to you. And so he wants to postpone the January 16th hearing to exercise his right to attend this inauguration. The judge, and I wish I had been in the courtroom to hear him say this, the judge said, no, your social calendar is not good cause to postpone this hearing. You will be in court, Mr. Giuliani. So even though we don't get, an opportunity because there were no cameras in the courtroom, and even though I wasn't there, I don't know if any of you were in court. Here's what needs to be done. We need to watch Rudy. I was looking at sorry, I got a little distracted because I was reading your comments in the side. Yes, Nick, Freeman and Moss deserve all of Rudy's assets. He didn't give an S what happened to them, so no sympathy for the jerk. Yeah, here we go. So, what you have to remember is people say there is no law in America. There still is. Maybe not. Maybe Donald Trump is above the law, but Rudy Giuliani is definitely below. He is below the tires of the law, running over him backward and forward and backward again. Let's play Rudy freaking out after this hearing to the press. This is good stuff. Get your popcorn ready.
I have no cash. It's all tied up. So right now, if I wanted to call a taxi cab, I can't do it. I don't have a credit card. I don't have a checking account. I have no place I can go take cash out except a little bit that I saved, and it's getting down to almost nothing. I have a business. I can do business expenses, but I'm very careful about that because God forbid I should make a mistake between a personal and a business expense. Unlike Hunter Biden, I go to jail right away.
Okay. Always Hunter Biden, and let his salad put up the smallest violins. So, Rudy, I know this may be hard for you to understand, but you are healthy enough to walk. You can walk from Lower Manhattan to wherever you're going. I don't know where he's staying now that he's having to give up his apartment. Also, there is this thing called the subway, right? And so if you're short on cash, you can take the subway. I've seen that done. I've actually been in the subway, and given that, Rudy, you were the mayor of New York, I'm sure you very much know about the subway system. So that is Rudy Giuliani crying poor. He'll have to figure out how to get to both his court date in Manhattan on the 16th of January, which let me take a look, guys, and see when that is. The 16th of January falls on a Thursday. The inauguration falls on a Monday. You know, I know he's not walking to Washington, D.C. So here's my thing. All the money he's going to be spending to travel to the inauguration, pay to have his, I don't know, clothes dry cleaned, all the drinks he has at the bars that aren't at specific parties, and so on. Maybe he could use some of that money to pay, I don't know, for a taxi cab. My heart is not bleeding for him. There's plenty of time between Thursday and Monday to get on an Amtrak and go down to Washington or ask a friend for a ride. And hey, maybe his good buddy Donald Trump could even throw a few coins at him, given everything he's already done for the man. And, you know, I know Donald is cheap, but I can imagine he could cough up a little change so Rudy could catch an Uber. Okay, and probably not an Uber, probably a taxi where he can actually pay cash. So that's our poor little Ruby. Now, Rudy, not Ruby, Rudy and Ruby, two different people in this situation. Now, we've got more. Before I move on to tell you some more about what's going on, some more news about Donald Trump threatening to impose this 25% tariff on all goods coming from Mexico, Canada, and China. This threat to do this the minute he gets sworn into office. I got to show you something in this cartoon that is so good. It is characterizing Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House. I hope this goes viral. Here we go. You can see this. This is a picture. If you get the idea, the point of view is a woman who is in a stall in a restroom. And we have Mike Johnson peeking his head under. You can see his tie has flipped over, and you can see it's the front of the tie. You see the Republican elephant decal, and you can see the woman's face because he's got a mirror looking up her skirt, but you see her face looking shocked, and his head is under the stall, and it says, "We're just making sure there are no weirdos in the woman's bathroom." And then it says, "Mike Johnson was here." This is such a good political cartoon. I encourage you to share it. It does absolutely capture what's going on. How are you going to actually police women's restrooms to make sure that the people using them have the genitals associated with women? I don't know. That's one way, and it's really creepy. Okay, so now we have got more. Oh my God. I forgot one thing. Before we talk, I've got three more topics. I've got one more thing about Elon. I've got some really good news out of the White House about the Middle East. And then I also need to talk about the tariffs. Okay. Again, more Elon, some crazy stuff. Good news out of the Middle East, the tariffs, and then we'll go to Crazy Town, you guys. It's a big show. Okay. Elon Musk, our new leader. I call him that because he's not really our new leader, but you know, he kind of bought the election and he kind of has Donald Trump's ear and he won't go away, as mentioned. So his mom, I don't know if you've been getting wind of this, but Donald Trump's mom is making the rounds in the news. And his mom is very proud. Her name is May Musk. Very proud of her son. And I don't want to even get into Elon's father because there's some really, unfortunately, creepy stuff about him. But let's just deal with the mom. She's not married to Elon's father anymore. She's an independent lady. And here she is on Fox News talking about her son. Let's discuss on the other side. This is a treat.
I mean, he walks around as the wealthiest man in the world, bar none. Do they like him, really?
You know, I don't like the word wealthy or billionaire or things like that because I think it's degrading. I think he's the genius of the world. And people are loving him for that. They don't,
oh my God.
When they see me, they go crazy because I'm his mother. But they love him because of what he does, and they respect him, and I'm very proud of him.
I can't imagine what it would be like to be his mother, watching him go from PayPal to rockets to Tesla to all just one thing after another. You ever surprised about what he's coming up with next?
Well, every time I'm surprised, and every time I say, don't take on something else. And he doesn't listen to me.
My God. Yeah. So much there. The last kicker. Every time I say to him, he says he's going to take on something else, I tell him not to. Yeah, I feel that. I feel that, May. But also, she doesn't like the word wealthy, and she doesn't like the word billionaire. She prefers the word genius. Well, no, sorry. No, sorry. Genius is something you have to actually possess. It's not something you can buy and fake. He might be very smart. He might be even brilliant, but he is not a genius. He is a billionaire. He is the richest man in the world, and he's also very dangerous. However, he is persuadable, as mentioned. Okay, let's talk about some really good news out of the White House yesterday. This is Joe Biden first talking about the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. Let's play it.
Under the deal reached today, effective at 4 a.m. tomorrow local time, the fighting across the Lebanese-Israeli border will end. Will end. This is designed to be a permanent cessation of hostilities. What is left of Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations will not be allowed, well, I emphasize, will not be allowed to threaten the security of Israel again. Over the next 60 days, the Lebanese army and state security forces will deploy and take control of their own territory once again. Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure in southern Lebanon will not be allowed to be rebuilt. And over the next 60 days, Israel will gradually withdraw its remaining forces. And civilians on both sides will soon be able to safely return to their communities and begin to rebuild their homes, their schools, their farms, their businesses, and their very lives. We're determined this conflict will not be just another cycle of violence. And so the United States, with the full support of France and our other allies, has pledged to work with Israel and Lebanon to ensure that this arrangement is fully implemented.
Okay. I love the word ceasefire. I love hearing about the United States working with its allies to make sure it's implemented. But what about Gaza? Biden had something to say about that conflict as well.
And just as the Lebanese people deserve a future of security and prosperity, so do the people of Gaza. They too deserve an end to the fighting and displacement. The people of Gaza have been through hell. Their world's absolutely shattered. Far too many civilians in Gaza have suffered, far too much. And Hamas has refused for months and months to negotiate a good faith ceasefire and a hostage deal. And so now Hamas has a choice to make. Their only way out is to release the hostages, including American citizens, which they hold. And in the process, bring an end to the fighting, which would make possible a surge of humanitarian relief. Over the coming days, the United States will make another push with Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, Israel, and others to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza. With the hostages released and the end of the war without Hamas in power, that becomes possible. As for the broader Middle East region, today's announcement brings us closer to realizing the affirmative agenda that I've been pushing forward during my entire presidency. A vision for the future of the Middle East where it's at peace and prosperous and integrated across borders. A future where Palestinians have a state of their own, one that fulfills its people's legitimate aspirations, one that cannot threaten Israel or harbor terrorist groups with backing from Iran.
This is what we could have had if Kamala Harris had been elected. But we all well know now that Donald Trump will be sworn in January 20th of next year, and he has put Mike Huckabee in as the ambassador, right, to Israel, who doesn't believe that Palestinians exist or even should have a state. Think about what's going to happen. It's tragic. And I'm just going to sigh and say I didn't vote for Donald Trump and a lot of people who care about Gaza, who have Palestinian families in Gaza or in the West Bank. Brilliant people who I know decided to vote for Jill Stein or for Donald Trump out of a protest vote to show everybody, because they said there was no difference between the Democrats and what Donald Trump would bring in. History will prove them wrong, and all the rest of us, because of those protest votes and more, are going to be suffering the crumbling of our democracy. But like I said, it's all about the states and local governments. Now, speaking of the other nonsense that Donald Trump is going to be ushering in, let's now talk about the tariffs before we move to Crazy Town. Now, as mentioned, Donald Trump announced that he was going to impose these 25% tariffs on all goods coming in from Mexico, Canada, and China. And as you know, despite the lies that he told in the campaign and even before, a tariff is a tax. It's a tax paid by the business that is importing either the finished good or the parts. It's a tax paid by the business. And because the business has to pay that tax to the U.S. government, it's a tax imposed by the federal government on U.S. businesses. I don't know how to make it any more clear than that. And when the businesses get taxed, they pass the tax along to us. The business could be just someone importing a finished refrigerator or a finished car or something else. And then immediately they tack on, they incorporate the tariff into the price for us. Or it could be a part or an input into something else. And in that case, again, it goes into the cost of manufacturing and it gets more expensive. Moreover, businesses in the U.S., even if they have no foreign imports brought into, to what they make, they will raise their prices because they can, because the other prices go up, or because something else maybe that they have to pay for that will be more expensive. And this will be reflected across the board. Now, when you think about what we get from these countries, it's profound when you actually listen to to what comes in from, for example, Mexico and Canada and China. And I get that there still is longstanding suspicion and disappointment with the NAFTA policy, the North American Free Trade Agreement that was entered into in the Clinton administration. We're going back about 30 years. And this did hurt. This did hurt American manufacturing. But the way to fix that, if we wanted to fix that, isn't to suddenly impose tariffs in this way. And it isn't to impose tariffs for which there is no definitive measure for when to end it. For example, if Donald Trump wanted to impose tariffs until there were X number more American jobs and those could be counted, to the extent he wanted to do that, at least you could measure whether the policy was successful. Instead, what Donald Trump has said is that these tariffs will be in place until the flow of undocumented people stops and until the fentanyl flow stops into the U.S. Now, the trouble with that is, and this is something that Justin Wolfers, he's an economist from the University of Michigan, was on Chris Hayes last night, that he pointed out, which is this: by definition, undocumented workers are not counted when they come into the country. So there's no way to measure whether that is declining or stopped. Secondly, same thing with illegal drugs like fentanyl. Okay, non-measurable. So what this means is Donald Trump can use the imposition, the adjustment, and the reduction. So he could use the imposition, raising the tariff amount, lowering it, or removing it as a way to reward his friends and punish his enemies. So we all know that these tariffs will hurt the auto industries in Detroit. And so what does that mean? What will they have to do as a concession to him, right? What is this all about? It's not well thought out. And of course, what happened immediately, I think Mexico, the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, said Let me give you some facts, when it comes to importing drugs. Fentanyl, the vast majority of the fentanyl that comes into the U.S. from Mexico is brought in by Americans. She also has talked about what her plan would be, which is a trade war. You want to throw a tariff on us, we'll throw one on you. And as Chris Hayes reminded us last night, Donald Trump did experiment with tariffs, right? He experimented with tariffs on imports from China, and China retaliated by throwing tariffs on soybeans that get exported from the US and imported into China, meaning people who would be buying soybeans in China would have to pay more if they got them in the US. As a result, there was less demand for the US soybeans, and stuff was dying on the fields, and farmers freaked out. And they had to get billions of dollars in subsidies from the Trump administration so they wouldn't go broke. These are the things that happen behind the scenes, and they don't make it onto corporate media, because even as I'm talking, I wonder if your eyes are glazing over. There's got to be a better way to present the fact that dealing with international trade, with tariffs, with a complex mixed economy of the private and the public sector is not simple. You make an adjustment here, something else adjusts there. We need to be more honest about what we're doing and work the way Pete Buttigieg did and say, what are we trying to do here? And let me add one last thing before I now show you some of the conversations on the news media about these tariffs. They're very good. I forgot one more thing to say about Elon Musk, and I wonder if you all caught it in the chat and I didn't see it. Who do you think benefits from the proliferation of EV charging stations? I don't know. Electronic vehicle manufacturers? Tesla, for example? Talk about ungrateful and ignorant. I'm surprised he didn't actually know what was going on when he said when he retweeted Don Trump, when he commented in response to Don Trump Jr.'s attack on Buttigieg. Now, secondly, when it comes to these tariffs on auto imports, the way it's set up, it won't hurt Elon Musk. Isn't that fancy? Now, one more thing about tariffs before I show you the clips. Gavin Newsom of California has a brilliant idea. Apparently, I don't know if you know this, as part of the Green New Deal, there have been tax credits associated with buying electronic vehicles. And apparently, the Trump administration would allow those to end, right? So the incentives that would encourage us to buy e-vehicles. And they're not on all of them. There have been on some of them, but that would just end. And so what Gavin Newsom said is, okay, I will create a California tax credit for e-vehicles, but that will only be for everything but Teslas, which is pretty funny. And the other thing someone has pointed out, I don't know if it was in response to something Newsom had said, but this is the deal. Let people know that it's the Trump tariff. If I were a retail store, if I were Walmart or Target or General Motors or any other business or a restaurant, I would make clear, I wouldn't say this is the sales tax, this is whatever. I would say what percent, I would say the dollar amount of the product that was, this is like 25%, and it would say Trump tariff expense. Just like he put his name on the checks, we have to put his name on the pane, the Trump tariff. Okay, let's talk more about the proposed Trump tariff. And this thing is, this is kind of crazy. This is how far Scott Jennings will go in discussing how to deal with the tariff and also the fentanyl. Let's play this.
The past remain in Mexico, all of these sort of programs.
But again, Mexico has actually put a lot more border security on its southern border.
It's really working wonders. This is
crazy. Again, border crossings are down 75%. They're back to what they were under Trump.
If I were her, I would be prepared for my country to possibly have United States military incursions to take out the drug factories and the people who do this to us.
So you think we should not only have a trade war, we
Yes.
should have a military war with
I think
Mexico?
we have to do what we have to do to stop.
Holy
I'm glad
shit.
we all agree we should be de-escalating.
I think
glad.
but
It sounds like remember the Alamo. I mean, it sounds
for
crazy.
for
Like
people who
you're
are
going to
dying
send.
in
So
Kentucky,
not
it
only are
is.
we going to send the military on people who are here in the United States, we're now going to send the military over the border to attack Mexico.
No, I think
Again, it's Americans who are bringing the drugs.
I think
over.
there
90%
are
of the drugs coming
strategic
in
ways
are
to use
from
the United
Americans.
States military to control immigration.
I mean, these Scott Jennings, these talking points that he puts out there are ridiculous, but they're dangerous because they're softening people for this idea that we're going to invade Mexico. There's a little more to this. I love Charlotte Rampell. Let's play the next part of this, and then we'll get to Crazy Town.
National security, and it's this poison that is killing
Do you
American
know-
people all over this
Oh,
country.
I 100% agree. Like the fentanyl epidemic is horrible. It's tragic. We need to do
And
something
China's
about
part of it as well, and they're part of it as
You
well.
know that there actually was bipartisan legislation intended to increase our fentanyl detection technologies at the border, and Trump killed it. That was the bipartisan border bill that Trump basically unilaterally
I know
killed.
you keep fighting these old battles.
It's
Donald
not an
Trump,
old ba-
Donald,
you're saying
and,
it's a
and you're
very-
not over it.
no,
Donald
you're
Trump won,
saying it's a
and
current
he wants
issue.
and
I'm
he
saying we
wants
have a
the
solution.
border secured.
That's the
and
solution to
but
it.
he wants the
That's the solution
It's not
to
the
it.
only.
Okay. Old battle? It's the battle. It's right now. It's not an old battle that Donald Trump and the Republicans tried to block the border security plan. But okay. So guys, we are going to move to Crazy Town. And I got some feedback that the Crazy Town music was too loud. And you couldn't hear me talking. I was trying to turn it up and modulate it. So today I will make sure it is the right level. And I will look for comments for people to tell me if it is not. So let's go. Okay, guys. Even though Crazy Town is playing. Okay, I think it's good. It's good. Jason says it's good. Today, guys, Crazy Town, he is funny as hell. For some of the youngsters in the crowd, you might not remember Rod Blagojevich from Chicago, who went to prison for bribery because he was trying to parachute himself into a certain position. Thank you, Jaroslav. Happy Thanksgiving. And anyway, Blagojevich, I mean, he was one of the people that for whom his sentence was commuted. He was, it goes back to that he was, he was known as Blago. He was governor of Illinois. It was from like 2003 to 2009, and he was in prison for 8 years. Prison for 8 years on federal corruption charges, right? And he was trying to basically just to get the deal. This really to when Barack Obama was senator from Illinois. Remember this? And then he became president of the United States. So his seat was open. His seat was open as soon as he took office, right? And they needed to replace him. And so Rod Blagojevich, who had power, being the governor of Illinois at that time, was trying to get the position or sell it to somebody else. Let's listen to him right now for our Crazy Town.
About that governor as the nominee of the Democratic Party. Frankly, I'd have been a better candidate with Kamala Harris, notwithstanding my criminal record. He was a terrible candidate as governors go, and she made a big mistake by not choosing Shapiro in Pennsylvania.
What? Did you hear this? Listen what he thinks.
When I think about that governor as the nominee of the Democratic Party, frankly, I'd have been a better candidate with Kamala Harris, notwithstanding my criminal record. He was a terrible candidate as governors go, and she made a big mistake by not choosing Shapiro in Pennsylvania.
Rod Blagojevich saying that Tim Walz was a terrible candidate for VP and that he would have been better, notwithstanding his criminal record. My friends, we have entered Crazy Town. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow morning. Enjoy your last night before Thanksgiving. Can't wait to talk about things we can be grateful for and what's on the menu. Thanks, guys.